live stream. So when that is up, we will.
All right, we're up.
Okay, very good. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church at Tullahoma. Today is Sunday, April 30th. So welcome to you at church, to those on Zoom and those online. So we will start with a reading. And this comes from Rumi, who lived during the 1200s. Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in the grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase, each other, doesn't make any sense. So now we'll move on to our chalice lighting. And Cass will do the reading. And if someone can light the chalice there at church, that would be great while I light this one.
Okay. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth.
Now we move on to announcements. So if you have an announcement, please raise your hand and provide that information. So yes, is that Doug?
Yes.
Go ahead, Doug, please.
First of all, if anyone's interested in trivia, this Friday, 6 o'clock at Trinity Lutheran, we usually have a team. Let me know. If there's enough, we'll get a table reserved for you. The cost is $10, and you do get a meal with that and 2 rounds of trivia contests and door prizes. Secondly, if you want to help with the yard sale on May 20th, please let me know. The Sunday prior, on the 14th, bring all your stuff in. We'll be sticking around afterwards to set up tables in here and get stuff out. Please put prices on all the things you bring in to help those of us who will actually be running it, so that we don't have to go around and price everything. That would be incredibly helpful. So just let me know on those 2 things if you can help or are interested. Thanks.
Other announcements?
Rick.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the Thursday night discussion group, covenant group, is continuing to meet. We met here at the church and we had 2-year-old popcorn, which tasted great. And thanks to Tom's secret ingredient, which he will not divulge. However, it is addicting. We wish others could join us. We were going to have a Zoom link also. It was not necessary. However, we will Zoom if necessary, thanks to the good graces of Tony, who knows how to do it.
No, we will not Zoom because we don't have Chuck's link.
We will not Zoom. We will not Zoom. All right. Well, whatever. I've been corrected. Anyway, y'all come. We're going to be looking at some TED Talks, I think, rather than the rethink thing for a while because of Chuck's absence. So bring a TED Talk. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Other announcements? All right. Oh, yes. Doug.
One other thing. Many of you know our nephew, Daniel Carnes. She has asked me to let everyone know that she is transitioning and her name is now Ciandra. I'll stumble over that till I get used to it. So anyway, if you see that name and don't recognize it, that's why. Anyway, if you see that name and don't recognize it, that's why.
Where is she now?
She lives here in town, but is sick and is not going to be here and has been sick. But has requested that officially be noted on the church membership roster, the new name.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that.
Doug, is it with a C or an S?
C.
Okay.
CIANDRA.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug. I have a couple announcements. As Tony mentioned, we do have a vacancy for the treasurer's position. This is in a very important position, and yes, thank you, Karen, for all the time and service you've provided. So if you are interested in that, please let me or one of the board members know. Along that line, it's never too late to pledge or make a donation, so you can do that at any time. And if you wish to make a donation, just send a check to our P.O. Box 331 in Tullahoma, and you can do it that way. And if you do get COVID and you come to church, please let one of the board members know so that we can let everybody know who's at church so they can take precautions and help prevent the spread. And yes, Carrie.
The speaker next Sunday is Robin Dunn, and she will be speaking about lessons from our animal friends, and she'll be in the building.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. And do you have any more information on the retreat, Carrie?
No, that will be forthcoming. It is the 14th, and we're going to start at 10 a.m., and we've got several activities, and we're going to have a salad bar, so bring your favorite salad topping. And pizza and Subway sandwiches.
Okay.
We're going to have plenty of food.
Okay, very good. Other announcements? No. All right. We will then move on to another reading. Love is our greatest purpose. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. All right, it is now time for our speaker. So Doug, I believe the topic is Strange New Worlds.
So fitting.
Yeah, actually it's Strange New World. I don't know if I sent it out wrong or if everyone's just a big Star Trek fan. Ta-da! Don't worry, they still see us. You just only have to look up here instead of over there and wonder what I look like on the big screen. So anyway, I'm glad I didn't hear that. It's been almost 15 years since Jancy and I first attended here. When we came, everything was configured differently in this room. The podium was actually over there where Costa is. This big divider.
Keep going.
The big divider was over there in front of the door, so if somebody came in, they would have to come around and it wouldn't be quite so disruptive. And I remember still vividly our first time visiting as we sat there, and I had sworn I would never go to church again, that I had had it with church, but we felt so welcomed. It was just totally different from the other church experiences we had had. No one was telling us what we had to believe. No one was doing an altar call. No one was making me feel guilty for being a sinner and unworthy. We were just welcomed. It was mind-blowing how pleasant it was. And I just said, yeah, I think this is a church I can go to comfortably and become a part of. And happily, for those 15 years, we have been a part of it in many different ways and in very much a huge part of our life. Now, we live in a world today far different from 15 years ago. In fact, I dare say the last 2 years have been the biggest change in a 2-year period in my lifetime, and that covers quite a bit. You know, COVID alone would have been dramatic enough. We spent a good part of a year isolating and trying to stay away from everyone as much as possible. Kids missed huge amounts of school. Adults worked from home in massive numbers. Everything changed. All these giant office buildings were empty as people figured out other ways to do work and grew to like not having to go into the office to do their work because it was so much more efficient. We have had 1 million plus American deaths from COVID, and throughout the world, 7 million plus. And we are just now, and it depends where you live too, because some parts of the country are different, it's just now starting to feel like things are almost normal again. And every time you think it's normal, you're still reminded, because if you go to the doctor's office, you have to put a mask on, and other things that let us know there's always that threat lurking around the corner that maybe the next mutation isn't going to be so friendly. And heaven help anyone who tries to get everyone to go back to the way it was 2 years ago. It's just not happening. And so we almost walk around on eggshells, wondering, waiting for the next shoe to drop. But on top of that, we had an insurrection in our country. For the first time, a president tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And no matter how you sugarcoat it, we're becoming more and more aware with each passing day how perilously close we came to a constitutional crisis. Just read the other day that Mike Pence, when he was in the basement, and his Secret Service were saying, we need to get you out of here, that they were communicating with Trump's Secret Service, and that if they had got Pence out of there, they never would have brought him back, possibly, and then they wouldn't have been able to count the votes. And then you would have had a constitutional crisis. That's how close we were. Never mind all the violence that was going on. We almost didn't follow the Constitution to transfer power. And now we have one party that still supports the man who led the insurrection. And you really doubt that both parties want a peaceful transfer of power if they lose next time. And if that offends your political sensibilities, that's what's happening. Sorry. I've never claimed to be a Democrat, but I can see a danger when I see it. I've studied dictatorships, fascism, Hitler's coming to power. I am concerned, deeply concerned. And then on top of that, we have a massive anti-vaccine movement. Even though the vaccine is what has allowed us to meet here today, as we do. And that is largely political. And we now know that by party, there's a big disparity between the number of people who get vaccinated. It's nuts. It's madness. But wait, there's still more. When I was a kid, we talked about the possibility of nuclear war. When I joined the Air Force, it was mere months after and the Soviet Union fell apart. When I joined the military, we had people doing something called sitting alert. This is what my dad did when I was a kid. They would live within walking distance almost of their aircraft, and they'd stay there for a week in barracks, ready to jump in their planes and go if nuclear war broke out. For 5 years. As a kid, I lived that life. And then it passed, and we stopped doing that. There was no fear. We were a global society. No one talked about nuclear war. But by golly, we do now, don't we? Sorry, I didn't think this was going to be emotional. So we've had an insurrection attempt, a pandemic that's killed 1 million Americans, and
I'm sorry, it was 6 million worldwide, not 7. Possibility of nuclear weapons being used. The largest war in Europe since World War II. A politically driven anti-science movement. Not to mention women's rights being destroyed. Trans people being attacked. Disney in a war with the governor. Good times, good times. So I was asked to speak today specifically about the things we mourn about. Well, I've just rattled off a bunch. But we also mourn the change in our church. But I felt we needed to go over some of the stuff in the world first, because that's directly contributed to the changes we've had to go through. Not only has the world changed dramatically, and sadly for the worse in many ways, things have changed in the world of the church also. Not just UU churches, but churches in general. Over the course of the last 2 years, if people got out of the habit of attending church in person, either because they could not attend at all, or because they could attend virtually and it was more convenient, some people just physically aren't going to go to church anymore because they have medical reasons. They don't want to be exposed to COVID in any shape or form, even the more mild versions. We have people who are physically just incapable of that sort of travel. And they realized, as churches had to go virtual in one way or another, that there was another option. So in-person attendance has gone down everywhere. Some have lost interest because they got out of the habit. But others have said, I'll do it, I'll attend, but I'm going to do it from the comfort of my home, or I'm just not willing to take the risk to do it in person medically. I'll do it from home. Talking to the people at First Christian, where we go to our Sunday school before we come here, their in-person attendance is down roughly 50%. According to the Institute for Family Studies, I did a little research on this just to see if this was a universal number. And I'll give you the exact quote since I am referencing someone else. This was data that was collected in April and May of 2020 by Barna Group. 1 in 3 practicing Christians dropped out of church. 1 in 3. During COVID-19. Church membership in the U.S. dropped below 50% for the first time ever in 2020. This goes all the way back to 1940 when they first started collecting this data. In 80 years, we are at the lowest church attendance ever. And then this from the Baptist News Global, an article by Mark Wingfield, which I'll be summarizing several sections of. This was a study called Exploring the Pandemic Impact on Congregations. It covered surveys of over 38 denominations. And they found several things that are pertinent to what we're going through. And the first one's particularly pertinent because it says small churches are shrinking. Multiple other studies have confirmed this trend. 90% of the churches in America, 90%, have fewer than 250 people. That seems gigantic to us, but this is still considered small, I guess. However, even though 90% of the churches are that small, 70% of churchgoers go to ones that are larger. So there's this sort of migration away from the small into the large. So 70% who go to church go to a very large church. It now appears that the pandemic has added fuel to this trend of big churches getting bigger on average and smaller growing smaller. Often larger churches were more prepared to offer online services. And the latest survey revealed larger evangelical churches were more willing to take the risk of spreading infection in order to keep growing. So large evangelical churches had online services and they downplayed the threat. If you know anything about Unitarian Universalists at the headquarters level, they were the exact opposite. When I checked a few months ago, when I was bringing up reopening, I checked the various churches around here, and the big ones were still closed. And this was just a few months ago. So they were extremely cautious. and that's probably impacted their numbers, but I don't know that for sure. Second point, hybrid worship, which is a big thing going on with us. One of the factors that related to growth is hybrid worship. There's still a segment of the population that's concerned about attending in-person services, while there's also a segment of the population that wants to attend in person. Churches that can cater to both have been more likely to grow, and that's just logic. Because if you shut down one or the other, you're going to lose groups of people. I can't reiterate enough, there are people who will never set foot in church again unless there's a dramatic change and COVID somehow magically disappears, or medical science somehow obliterates it. That's just part of our life from now on. 3, church conflict. The survey found that 1/4 of the congregations had no conflict at all regarding COVID and safety procedures and opening and hybrid services, etc. 1 in 4 did fine. However, the majority reported at least mild conflict. 17% said moderate conflict, and 7% reported severe conflict. And that brings us to where we are today. 2 years of COVID have changed our congregation and our services. It seems unlikely that the health concerns will never be a factor. I think, as I've said, this is just the new normal. We have experienced a pandemic, and it's always going to be lurking in the background. Fear that we might have to go through it all again, fear that we won't take the precautions we did last time, and it might even be worse. Even though I am vaccinated and boosted, and even though life seems pretty much back to normal for me here in Tennessee, there will always be the knowledge that another pandemic is very possible. Don't want to paint such a grim picture, except this is stuff we have to deal with. Longing for what used to be and what changes must be made have brought us to what I think is a unique point in our church history. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've ever had 2 candidates for any position for the board, ever. So now we have 2 candidates for president, and we have 1 position, treasurer, that no one's volunteered for as of yet. I believe, though I don't want to put words in their mouths, that our 2 presidents have some differences in the vision for our church, and I don't know if it's on the agenda for the next hour, but I sure hope to hear from both of them before we vote. It'll otherwise be an extremely odd vote where the candidates actually don't tell you anything, and we're going purely on name recognition. So I hope we hear from both of them and what they want to see happen. We've heard some of that, of course, over time, but since we're voting today, final words, I would say. What does the future hold? First of all, I don't see the hybrid service going away. I know that's a fear for those who rely on it. None of the candidates have said they want to get rid of it. And frankly, statistics show us that it's just necessary because of the new state of the world. It's also true that it's been a bone of contention in some respects, in that it impacts the physical service here. And I've spoken about this in the past myself. I won't belabor the point. I think things can be tweaked and fixed so that it's not obtrusive to those who are in person and still welcoming to those who are online. A hybrid service, regardless of how important it is to congregational growth or health, however, is a significant change to how we used to do things. And significant change brings sometimes problems, issues, disagreements. And we can't just pretend that's not the case. Doesn't mean it has to be crippling. It doesn't mean it has to be destructive. But it was a major change that was made out of necessity, but not made in the way we would normally make major changes, because for one thing, we weren't all meeting together. We opened the church up and we made changes step by step by step. When we first came, everyone had masks on and were spread out, and there weren't many people here. And I know at least one person said, so this is what church has become, and hasn't been back since. Obviously, we've made changes. It's much more like it used to be now. I can see people's faces. You can see my face. Whoever made that crack over there about my face, you get to see it. I'm going to find out who it was. So, what I would say out of all this is, when a significant change is made, you need lots of congregational input in a variety of ways. And we still do as we wrestle with it. Feedback is required to make it work well. Other than hiring a minister, this may be the most important change we have ever made. Maybe buying the building, but this is something that's going to be with us. It's not like we're going to do hybrid services for 6 more months and then we're shutting it down. This is a change in how we do business week to week. And therefore, I think some steps need to be taken in the near future. Again, this is my opinion. I'm not on the board, and you can take it or leave it, board members. But I have thought a lot about this sermon over the last couple of weeks. You know, what do you say before a vote that includes major changes that affect us for the years to come? First of all, it's pretty standard in churches, including UU churches, that when they develop a new vision or discover what a congregation seeks in a new minister or make any other significant change, leadership usually uses a combination of surveys, cottage meetings, focus groups, appreciative inquiries. These are all methods where small groups of people get together and talk about an issue in depth. It is vital that the congregation, and by the way, those items are listed in the handbook for ministerial search. If you're going to get a new minister in here and go into the search process, those are things you have to do or are highly recommended that you do before you even start looking at people. And everyone's going to tell you what they want in a minister. Well, what do we want with our church? What do we want for the future? What do we want in hybrid service? How are we going to function? We need to hear everyone in this. If you don't, people will be ticked and leave, or be ticked and stay and argue, and it won't be a smooth transition. So I highly encourage things like this to figure out how to make it work well, because it has to work well or we won't survive. And I really don't think, again, anyone wants to get rid of the hybrid service. I haven't heard anyone say that, but it can be made better. We did have a couple of hours of discussion last week, but that's far from enough. And we're not going to have enough discussion in the next hour either, because we've got a bunch of votes we have to do and maybe hear from both the presidential candidates. So there's going to be more work to be done afterwards, I think. I also think that if you want honest input, you have to have secret ballots on issues, because people vote based on peer pressure sometimes. No one wants to be the bad guy. No one wants to say, I don't like this. And so a lot of people put their hands up, and sometimes that's not going to be an accurate count. Let me emphasize a couple things here. Setting up the hybrid service was a lot of work, and the two people who made it possible, Tony and Katie, are never going to get enough thanks. But also, they make it work week to week. They didn't just get it set up. There's going to have to be other people who can do this too, because if they're both sick, does anyone even know how to make this go? I don't. So you two can never get sick and you can never miss. You can't go on vacation. It's nice to be invaluable. I'm sure you're appreciating the extra pay. But in all seriousness, they made it possible to do what we're doing. I mean, this is great to be up here and look out and see a really good number of people in our congregation. And then we have more people who are watching online. This just wouldn't have been able to happen without all the technology you see up here. And so my thanks again to both of you for what you've done. Secondly, many churches that have a hybrid service do not necessarily allow for the interactivity that we do, both joys and concerns, announcements, talking, during talkback, which I like to call discussion circle. I've never liked talkback. It sounds like you're talking back. And that's so confrontational. But I asked one person, are you over at First Christian, are you still, doing the online services? Oh, yes. Do you allow any sort of interactivity with the people who are watching? Oh, heavens, no. That would be chaotic. Or something like that. So you can be passive and watch, and that's what most churches do. We're trying to do something more complex than that, and that's why it has rough edges. So making our services interactive is taking things a step further than many churches have. And again, coming back to talk to everyone, hear what everyone has to say, listen to suggestions, try to make it something that is interactive, incorporates everyone, but isn't intrusive. That's why Jancy covers up the TV screen up here, because some people don't like seeing two faces going at the same time doing the same thing. It was disruptive when I saw it, so I get that. That's a simple step that fixes a problem that is disruptive to some people. Other people may not mind at all, I don't know. Finally, I shouldn't say finally. You're all thinking I'm almost done. I'm not. Third. Oh, he's so mean. Once the election is over, and Tony stole my thunder, there will be some people who are disappointed in the result. That's what happens when you have an election, and there are two candidates. And regardless of who wins and who loses, remember one of our 7 principles. We affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregation and in society at large. So I hope that despite the inevitable disappointment, we appreciate the process that allows us to vote. The process we'll be involved in today, and will not then say, well, I just can't come here anymore, or I don't want to participate anymore, or I don't want to be involved, I'm not going to quit, but what's the point? Please try to avoid that no matter what happens, because I, for one, have no clue who's going to win the election. But I think it's very, very critical that we assume best intents on both candidates, that they care about what's going to happen to the congregation and want its best possible future. And if you believe that, then the disappointment will be minimal. So I'll close with this. There. That's honest now. We're almost there. When I first attended here, I found a small but welcoming group of people who encourage free thought, reason, open exploration of any number of religious or philosophical approaches to life. I was an atheist, and if they didn't like it, I wasn't going to stay. And they said, that's fine. We don't care. That's great. I said, well, I have no excuses. I guess I have to come back. It was amazing that there was a church that didn't care if I believed in God or not, but rather said, explore and check it out for yourself. And people change throughout their time here. You're not locked in, and there's no statement of faith or creed that you must subscribe to that says you can be a member. It was apparent to me that this congregation offered a place of welcome for people who were usually unwelcome at virtually all churches. I even had a young man back when I was the minister who came up to me after a couple visits and said, well, I'm a Satanist. And I don't know if he wanted me to freak out or not, but I just said, well, that's cool. I've read about Satanism. Most Satanists don't even believe in Satan. It's rather a totally different perspective on things, and we had a good discussion. And he knew it was fine to come here and be a Satanist. How many churches will say that? Zero, at least around here. Just don't tell anyone else or they're going to call us the Church of Satan. But you know, he was welcome here. If you're not here to cause trouble, if you're not here to, hurt others, you're welcome. What a great bottom line for a church. Explore, explore, explore. The world is filled with wonder and mystery. We're not going to tell you the truth. You get to explore. That's why I love this place. If our church is to recover from the last 2 years of madness in the crazy world we live in now, we need a strong local congregation. Regardless of how big the online membership might be, and I for one don't think we're going to be overwhelmed with hundreds of people who join us online, but maybe that will happen. I don't know. But we need the support here that people provide for each other. We need to focus on the relationships that have been strained by extended absences enforced by COVID, and in some cases, disagreement over the future and where we're going. I've witnessed some anger, stress, and deep concerns over the last few months that I've seen in higher quantities than I've probably ever seen here. Personal relationships are the bedrock of a congregation. And if too many are damaged, anything else we do is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. You've got to have the foundation. Some people say the foundation of the church is God, is Jesus, is the Bible. The foundation of this church is each other. We must remember that always. Or it is time to sell the building and move on and do something else. If we don't have loving, caring relationships with each other, it's all for naught. So, I'm sorry that part of this was a bit of a downer, but we live in a crazy, down world right now, and this place has to provide the light and the uplift and the hope. And so it's time to make it happen. We're working on it. We got a lot of votes coming up, a lot of discussion in the next hour, important decisions for our future. So I really hope that at this point, we always keep foremost and primary in our minds our relationships to each other, the foundation of our church. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. That was great. Really appreciate that. Very timely and right on target. We will now close with our traditional closing of 4:14.
And you people at church can sing it out loud. If the people on Zoom would like to sing it, will you please mute and we can all sing.
There we go. So, as we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return. All right, we will take about a 10-minute break. No, actually, let's come back right at 11 o'clock. And it's about 13 minutes, and then we will start a